Do you ever wonder if the signs and synchronicities that you appear to be getting from the universe, or God, or some higher truth, are actually synchronicities? Or if you're just driving yourself mad and seeing what you want to see? I'm coming at you live in a pre-recorded video from this field full of rocks to explain and explore how we can tell the difference between synchronicity from some higher truth, as opposed to something that seems like a synchronicity but is just a projection of our own stuff onto the world around us. It's really important to know the difference between the two, because if you think that your own stuff is actually more meaningful than it actually is, then you're not going to be able to feel it, to heal it, and you're going to end up getting lost and just going around in circles. This video is going to show you the difference between the two, so you can grow real and get in the flow. So first things first, as far as fields full of rocks goes, this is a pretty good one. I've actually never been to this place in my life, so I don't know what I'm going to find as I continue to stroll through this field of rocks. But why don't you join me as we explore this synchronicity thing and what it's all about? So what is a synchronicity anyway? That is the ultimate question. Carl Jung defined it as an acausal connecting principle, which just means that it's where we see a connection between the inner and outer world, between the subjective and objective, that goes outside or beyond the normal rules of causality, cause and effect. What that basically means is sometimes things happen in our inner experience that are reflected in some amazingly beyond coincidental way in the external world. The example that Carl Jung used was that he was talking to one of his clients about a dream that she had, and she had a dream about a certain bug, a scarab beetle or something like that. And as they were talking, one came along and started banging on the office window. You might have had these experiences yourself, maybe not with a scarab beetle, but with some strange seeming connection between the inner and outer. I had one myself with a coaching client. When I first started coaching, I used to have clients come around to my house, which I don't do anymore. But anyway, we were making some coffee on the Italian coffee mocha, because that's how we roll. And if you don't know, this is a device that you put on the hob, a little metal pot. And we were talking about how this coaching session that we were having was a bit of a turning point in the client's life, which sounds very arrogant now that I'm thinking about it. But anyway, we were saying, like, once this session's done, it's like he's getting out of the train station and onto the train. And I pointed at the door. I said, look, when you got that door, it's like the train has arrived, you're getting back on it. And at that very moment, the coffee mocha started whistling like a steam train. We both knew what was going on. We looked at each other like, what the F is happening here? But that's the synchronicity. The inner experience aligned in an astronomical kind of way with the external things that were going on. And you can't explain that stuff with any scientific kind of explanation, because it does go beyond the normal rules of cause and effect. So what the hell is going on? I believe and I know that synchronicity is real, but I also know that a lot of the synchronicities I've had have actually amounted to nothing. So why is that? Like, what is actually happening in these cases? Well, now I found myself in this forest, which I was not expecting, but here we are. We've gone from a field of rocks to a field of trees, which is very exciting. One thing that's really helped me when it comes to thinking about all this synchronicity stuff is thinking about the different levels of the mind and how we can relate to ourselves and life. A lot of the time we think that we're experiencing a synchronicity, but actually it's just our unconscious mind showing something that the conscious mind needs to become aware of. There are three main levels, which I've already mentioned two of them. The first one is the conscious mind, which is just a little fragmented conceptual space in our heads that we use to interpret reality. Then there's the unconscious mind, which is a lot deeper. There's all kinds of emotions and memories and shadow aspects that we haven't faced yet. But then on a deeper level, there's the superconscious mind, which is basically just wholeness or life itself, God, truth. When you understand these three levels, you can see that there's a kind of pathway of the truth breaking through into our lives, into our conscious experience. And the unconscious is always trying to become conscious, and the superconscious is always trying to become unconscious to become conscious. That's what I think. There's a natural drive towards wholeness. If we understand this, then we can start to look at the synchronicities in our life through this lens and figure out whether it's something that we need to pay actual attention to, as though it is coming from God or something like that, or whether it's something that we actually need to pay attention to because it's a case of the unconscious mind trying to bring awareness to something in ourselves that needs to be integrated. There's a difference between the two, and when we understand it, it just makes things keep flowing. We can stay in the Godwave instead of stopping and starting and banging our heads against a brick wall, waiting for some sign from the universe to show us how to change things, when the change is already happening because the flow is always flowing. So I just want to bring your attention to this field that I am in. I feel like I'm in Jurassic Park or something. Wow. The reason it's important to understand all this stuff is because if you want to feel good in your life, if you want to keep growing and flowing, then you need to constantly be moving towards wholeness instead of fragmentation. The short version of what stops us from doing this is that we pick up an identity in childhood, a fragmented version of ourselves that I call the ego, that keeps the real version of us in hiding. The real version is the shadow self. I've made tons of videos about this already, so I won't rant and rave about it. But ultimately, the more we cling to the ego, the more we take ourselves out of our own lives, and we end up feeling like there's something missing and that we need to reconnect to life at a deeper level. If we don't understand that the natural drive towards wholeness is always calling us back, because everything is moving towards wholeness constantly, which involves cycles of death and rebirth, which is why we end up dying anyway. If you don't understand this, then you cling to the fragments, and then the shadow self is always in hiding, and you keep projecting it out into the world, and you don't realize that the signs and synchronicities you're getting are just the shadow calling you back home. Carl Jung said, again, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you'll call it God. The unconscious mind isn't God. The unconscious mind is the parts of you that need to be integrated. And if you want to start moving into deeper realness, living your real life, accepting that it is what it is and I am what I am, then you need to understand this so that you don't block the natural drive towards wholeness that is unfolding within and around you at all times. The main two ways, that we block the natural drive towards wholeness are at the level of the mind, the way that our beliefs and the way that we think holds us back from the truth and makes us cling to the ego, and at the level of our emotions. We have emotional blocks, and so we don't feel our feelings. We forget that emotions are emotion, energy, and motion, and we don't allow feelings to rise and fall and be integrated in the way that they need to be. When we have these two blocks, mental and emotional, then we become more and more fragmented over time. The emotional reservoir inside us gets more and more filled with all kinds of unprocessed, unresolved emotional stuff, and then we project it out into life, and if we're not careful, we just say, oh, it's just a synchronicity, it's just a sign. But actually, it is a sign, but not in the way we think. It's a sign that we need to start integrating things so we can go to that deeper level of feeling those real synchronicities in the Godwave, or in the flow of moving deeper into wholeness day by day. So I don't want to sound paranoid, but I do believe this helicopter has been following me for the last 2 or 3 days. I don't literally mean that, so don't be calling a psychiatrist or anything, but I do keep seeing helicopters for some reason. Maybe it's my unconscious mind tuning into them. Oh my goodness. And my reticular activation system, the part of the brain that looks for patterns and repetition, is now just putting more significance on these helicopters. Okay, now I understand what's going on. Well, goodbye cruel world. Not really. The reason that these mental and emotional blocks make things so complicated is because they take us away from our realness. They take us away from the natural flow of life, and they cause us to end up living in the void. The void is just a fancy way of saying that we end up being disconnected from the truth about ourselves, the world, and reality. And when we're living in the void, we're constantly going to feel an itch. We're going to feel inner tension. We want things to change, but we don't know how to change them, because we often don't realize that the only reason we're feeling the void is because we become disconnected from life itself. And so we start looking all around us at things in the world, at relationships, at all kinds of things, good things in many cases, but we treat them as the ultimate thing because we think they're going to be a substitute for the disconnection from ourselves that's caused us to feel the void in the first place. This makes things more complicated, because when we're trying to fill the void with all kinds of stuff, we'll put something on a pedestal as being the ultimate, and we think that if we can get whatever this thing is, it's going to remove that inner tension that we feel from being disconnected from ourselves in the first place. What this basically means is we end up putting something on a pedestal, deciding that it's going to be the solution to all our problems, but then looking out into the world around us, projecting our emotional stuff out into the world around us, thinking that we are going to get signs or synchronicities or symbols or whatever you want to call them, that what we think is going to fix us is going to come to us. And so we're looking around at the world with this inner tension, hoping, praying that some kind of a sign is going to take that tension away. And this is what gets us caught up in all kinds of spiritual bullshit and the things that take us away from our own growth. I really love this tree as well. A really common example of how people try to alleviate this tension within themselves of the void with signs and symbols and synchronicities is when they start looking for angel numbers. Now, it's not up to me to say that angel numbers are a real thing, and that sometimes maybe they do come from the superconscious mind of God or whatever you want to call it, but in general, a lot of the time it goes like this. People have this inner tension and they feel like they need to get some kind of thing in the world to put themselves back on the path to feeling healed. And so they take some good thing like money or whatever, they treat it as the ultimate thing, and then they start looking for signs that it's going to happen, that it's just going to land on their doorstep somehow, which it could also happen, but very rarely. But anyway, they'll start looking for signs, and then they'll start seeing angel numbers everywhere. A 111, a 22, 3, 4, 5, and they'll see it because their reticular activation system again is tuned in to looking for these kind of things, and then they'll feel a little bit of a sense of peace that they're on the right path. But then they don't change anything and nothing changes. They're just like, oh, okay, an angel number. But what they don't really think about in most cases is that every hour of the day you have at least 5 chances to see an angel number. There's an 11, a 22, a 33, 44, 55. And so the odds are, if you've told your unconscious mind to be looking for these things, you're going to see it, and it's not going to get you anywhere because you've gone looking for it to fill the void instead of filling the void first by reconnecting to the truth and then getting into the flow and allowing the synchronicities to come to you. And ultimately, that is what I think is the difference. If it's real, you don't need to go looking for it. There's no tension with it. It just comes, and you might still be in a period of your life where it's challenging or whatever, but there's a steadiness and a groundedness. You're not trying to fill yourself with anything. You're trying to give what you're full with to the world, and then you might get some little winks and nudges. This tension then is really the key to understanding whether or not a synchronicity is real or if it's just a projection of some stuff that needs to be faced. When I say real, I mean it's that higher level of coming from the superconscious mind. You're in the flow of the Godwave. The unconscious mind becoming conscious is still real in many ways because it's directing you back towards wholeness and integration. But ultimately, if you're feeling that tension and you need these signs to give you a little bit of a release because you don't trust yourself and you don't trust life, and so you have to externalize your trust in life to a projection of yourself put out there, which is all very complicated. If you don't trust life, then you need the signs to give you a little bit of validation and comfort. If that tension's not there because you've worked on your inner foundation first and foremost, then the experience with the synchronicity is a little bit different, because you're not looking for it, like I said earlier. It's almost like it comes looking for you. You put yourself on your real path, and you start taking real action, and then the universe, or God, or the superconscious mind kind of just nudges and winks to show you that you're moving in the right direction and that you are being real. But you don't need those signs to try and fill you or to give you reassurance that you're going to get whatever thing it is in the world that you think you need. It's just something that happens, and you don't need to read too much into it, because it's just a reminder that you and life are working on the same terms, moving in the same direction, and that direction is real. The synchronicity that's aligned with the ego is more like an addiction. It has an addictive quality to it. Well, it's almost like you've got a crush on somebody, but you don't know if they're crushing back on you or if they're even interested in you. And so you're just looking for some kind of validation, some kind of sign. And a lot of the time in that situation, speaking from experience, when you got a crush on someone and you haven't actually gone up to them and said anything, then all that ends up happening is you project your desire onto the situation, and you end up seeing things that aren't really there. Ultimately, you project your desire onto the person, and then you start seeing little things, like they might smile just because they're smiling, but you interpret that smile as meaning that they're deadly in love with you and that they're gonna be your ride or die. And then eventually, maybe you make a move, you find out that they think you're the scum of the earth and that you're an ugly bastard and that they don't want anything to do with you, and you realize that all the things you were seeing were just a reflection of what you needed in yourself. You needed to give yourself some love, some attention, some acceptance, some care, whatever it is, but you were projecting it out. This is the same with those ego-based addictive synchronicities, where we end up putting ourselves on the path to look for a sign instead of just letting them come to us. So I guess what I'm saying is, if you need it too bad, if you need a sign that things are working out, then actually you're blocking that flow of the natural drive towards wholeness. And there's a good chance that if you stop looking for signs and you just live your life, then things are going to work out and you'll get all the real signs that you need. Well, this doesn't have anything to do with anything, but this is one of those trees that has adapted itself to the winds of life, looking beautiful, showing you that if you adapt to reality and work with it, you can stand strong, and you're going to look unique. Let's be honest, not the most beautiful tree in the world, but it's beautiful in its own way. Well, here we are once again in the field full of rocks, although it is a slightly different field of rocks. There's a behemoth of a rock. We call that a crag in Yorkshire. But anyway, if you want to make all this stuff practical, then ultimately what we need to do is figure out how we can realign ourselves with that natural drive towards wholeness. The good news is it's always unfolding. Life is always moving towards wholeness. So are our emotions, our psyche, our relationship with ourselves. We go through spirals, and sometimes we have to let go of old things so we can be reborn into the next chapter of our lives. But we're always going deeper into wholeness every time we go through a spiral. If you want to start aligning in a deeper way, you need to align the conscious, unconscious, and superconscious mind, which means that you need to do your best, let go of the rest, which means you learn to trust yourself to do what you can do, which means that you have to regulate and integrate, regulate your nervous system so you're not freaking out anytime an emotion pops up or anytime something happens in life, because you're not seeing everything as a threat. So you regulate the nervous system, and then you integrate your emotions by actually feeling your feelings and dealing with your emotional blocks. We all have an emotional reservoir, like I said. The more stuff in that reservoir, the more friction we have in life, the more we cling to the ego, and the more we project out, and we see signs and synchronicities that are actually just the unconscious mind calling for our attention, and that blocks us sometimes, if we give it gravitas it doesn't deserve, from listening to God or truth and going deeper into life. So that's something we can really do. The other thing is take real action, which means let go of the rest. You do your best, trust yourself, let go of the rest, trust life. That means you do what you can do, but then you allow life to do what you can do. So you take action in the sense that you do what's real for you. The more regulated and integrated you are, the more you're going to understand your real values and the things that you're supposed to do to express your essence in the world. But also, you're going to be able to relax and allow life to fill in the blanks when you don't know what to do. sometimes not doing is still a form of doing it. So real action is about knowing when to step back and let life do its thing. When you do that, you're in the Godwave, you get the flow, things work out, and even if they don't, you can learn from them and keep going, because you know the sacred mantra that it is what it is, I am what I am, and so I'm going to do my best and let go of the rest. So ultimately, what we're saying in this video, and in all the other videos really, is at the point of life, nearly fell over and died, cracked my head on a rock, whoa, and then I nearly did it again. That's like 2 in a row, what the fuck. The whole point of life is to work with life, and that means to keep flowing. Sometimes that means getting out of our own way. The only thing that really gets in the way is the ego. I like to say that the ego is the opposite of reality. I stumbled over my words there. The ego is the opposite of reality, and so if you can step back from it, you can step away from the fragments of yourself and put yourself back in the whole. I like to call living like that these days, living in the Godwave. When you're in the Godwave, you're in the flow, but you also aren't forcing your stuff on life and seeing it as being something it's not. You're constantly learning and evolving, and then the signs are going to come of their own accord without you looking for them, because the signs are going to be the results that you get. Because when you're real always works, and so you can end up living a life that you actually want to be living and flowing in a way that feels true, instead of stopping and starting, banging your head against a bunch of rocks and wondering what the point of it all is. Peace.